Welcome to the Real Estate Women's Podcast. Thanks for pulling up a chair to our roundtable discussion. Here, we'll teach you how you can create a stream of passive income through multifamily investing, and we'll help you to shift your mindset so you can start living the life you really want to be living by design today. Hello, welcome to the Passive Investing Podcast. My name is Colleen.
And I'm Tamara.
And I'm Crystal, and we are the Real Estate Women. So in today's episode, we are going to be discussing financial planning. Financial planning is really a way of managing your money to achieve your goals and dreams. It involves defining your goals, understanding your financial picture, and taking steps to advance yourself to those goals. And today we have Pete here for that. Tamara?
Yeah, we're excited to have Pete Van Ice with us today to discuss just that. Thank you for joining us today, Pete. Pete is a financial advisor with Ameriprise Financial, where he is a chartered retirement planning counselor with over 22 years of experience. His areas of focus are family finances, estate planning, and retirement planning strategies. Recognized as a 5-star wealth manager for 10 years, his approach with his clients is that everyone's financial goals are unique and believes together by documenting your goals, tracking the progress, and adjusting to whatever life brings, he can help achieve them. So thanks for being here today, Pete.
Thank you so much for having me. As Tamara said, my name is Pete Van Ice. I'm a financial advisor with Ameriprise Financial. She mentioned I've been here for 22 years. I'm somewhat unique because I've never worked for another financial services firm, but that's because it's been a good fit. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. So really a way to start is, what's the first step or the first thing you do when like a new client gets referred to you or comes to you for financial advice?
Good question. There's obviously an initial phone conversation that I'll have to really kind of determine how much time, whether at a high level it's a good fit, but I'm a much more of a face-to-face person, especially talking initially with someone about something as serious as their finances. And so after the phone call, which that's not really the first thing. The first thing in the meeting is I have to get to know them. And someone might initially hear that and kind of roll their eyes, but there's actually three parts. Every initial meeting I have with clients goes the exact same way. The first thing is that I need to understand, have they ever worked with a financial professional before? What did they like? And what are their expectations? What does success look like? The second is we'll spend some time talking through initially at a high level what their goals are, and literally I'll say, so what brings you in today? And as you guys know, open-ended questions tend to really open the floodgates. But what I wrap up with to make sure that I've got the right context is I need to understand what they value. You might say, well, what does that mean? Well, part of what I've incorporated into my practice is something called behavioral advice. There's a former executive from our firm, a gentleman named Doug Lennox, who realized that there was a lot of people out there that were doing financial planning and planning in a lot of other areas, but they weren't achieving their goals. And he came up with what he refers to as the alignment method. And what he's really talking about is making sure people's values are aligned with their goals, which will then drive their actions. And ultimately, when I say understanding what someone values, depending on how talkative they are or aren't, I've been doing this long enough that I can put the pieces together. But in some cases, I actually have a deck of cards. There's 54 cards. There's 4 blank. The other 50 have values on them. The values have definitions. At the same time, it's not really important that they follow the definition of the value. What's important is we go through an exercise and I make clients prioritize, sort until we get to, and I'll spare you the rest of the details, but that we get to a finite number of cards, and then I have them explain to them why they're important to me. At the end of the day, finances uh, in general, are something people hold very tightly and take very personal for obvious reasons. Part of that has to do the way that we're just kind of programmed. I mean, when the average person
Mhm.
goes for a walk in the woods and they see a bear, what do you think they do? They run away, right? They don't spend a lot of time, right? And that's just how we're programmed uh, when we are uh, affected by an outside influence. We typically, it's either fight or flight. We don't really spend a lot of time thinking about which way to run. I mean, we might eventually, but you get my point.
Mhm.
Now, on the flip side, uh, I still remember all the times that I've opened my mouth and I literally have had the thought, why couldn't I have thought before I said that? And so so from the time that you think something to take action, that actually takes 4 times as long from a brain chemistry perspective. You might say, well, Pete, what does all that mean? Well, it means this. That when it comes to a difficult scenario where you're under stress, you're typically going to make a decision that's going to relieve that stress, and it may or may not be what's ultimately in your long-term best interest. I mean, it might save you 30 seconds of pain, but uh, derail much more than that. So the idea is putting people's decisions, uh, helping frame recommendations in the context of not just what's going to get them to their goal, but how it fits into what they value, because that's really what financial success is in a lot of ways. It's consistently making better decisions than you would have otherwise, but it comes down to what are they looking in terms of an advisor and how I'm going to interface with them, what the goals are, and then wrapping that up and connecting it with what they value. So that's why literally every first meeting is the same way, and it's those 3 areas that we cover. So,
That's a lot. We're digesting what you're saying
okay.
about things and just so you spoke about the cards
Mm-hmm.
and just so how does like risk tolerance play a role into that dynamic?
That's a great question. That's another great question. When someone shares with me what they value, if somebody values safety, that gives me a severe clue that they may not really have any tolerance, or, for lack of a better way to say it, appetite for any level of risk. So, as we go through that exercise, understanding what decisions they've made in the past, uh, how they've made them, because once we work through the values exercise and we talk about their investing approach, their experience, what they've done previously, what I will try to fit together and come to some common understanding is, here's what you said you valued. Here's where the decisions are that you made based on risk, what you have prioritized as important in your life, and are they aligning? Because that's in a lot of ways when people really uh, can really hit a tough financial patch, is when they're making decisions that they think are right but don't align with what they value. So someone that's, I need to save money into my company retirement plan. That's great. And they ask the person in the cubicle next door, which is nothing wrong with that because they're not sure where to go,
Right.
um, and they end up choosing something that doesn't do what they think it's going to do. I People will then literally go, "This doesn't work. I can't save into this. This is too hard for me to do." So as we go through that, there are some literal questionnaires to help give the client context to, this is what you can expect if you invest in this category of stock. This is historically what it's done in terms of going up and going down. But more importantly, here is the history of the crazy volatility, which is another way to talk about risk, of how it's gone up and down throughout a year, in a given year, over a 10-year period, to make sure that whatever risk they're actually taking is aligns with what they value and is something they're going to be able to hold on to and stick with, and not just say, because when I hear people say I want to be more risky, a lot of times if we haven't when I early on, if I didn't dig into it, what it turned out is they wanted to make more money, but they didn't want to necessarily take any more risk. And it's understanding there's a give and take, and not to use the cliche of no free lunch, but it's really the truth. So there's through discussion and literally uh, a paper text, like literally it's a data packet we give most people just print it out, but for them to understand if this is what you think is going to happen with your investment, then, in terms of what you expected, in terms of how you expected to go up over a long period of time, here are all the ups and downs that you can expect um, on your way to get there. And then on the flip side, there's a lot of people that don't realize that why would they take any more risk than they absolutely needed to if it's really about achieving your goals. And literally, goals are specific, measurable. It's a whole SMART thing, right? Specific, measurable, actionable, um,
Realistic.
yeah, realistic, and time bound. It's not like, oh, I want to get rich. So if you can really take that uh, approach, then you want to make sure you can not only stick with it, but that they can follow through. And some people, unbeknownst to them, have already done an excellent job. They just need somebody to kind of tweak things to make sure that they either stop taking the risk that they're taking or to put things in a different allocation that's going to be real more appropriate to what their short and uh, long-term goals are. I mean, the idea that people want to keep all their money in a retirement plan and not have any money for a rainy day is problematic. Tree falls on the roof. Okay, knock on wood. Nothing I want that to happen to anybody. It's a $1,500 deductible, right?
Mhm.
All your money's in your 401k and you're 40 years old. How do you get it out? Other than it being a pain and really less than ideal. So, making sure you're saving enough, saving in the right place, and that you understand that there's a lot that goes into risk beyond just um, how much you earn. There's looking at the long-term tax implications when you take the money at income. There are things that are, it comes to do with interest rates. It's I never thought it's the first time in my 20 plus year career that it's been real meaningful in the last 2 years to talk to clients about what's the best place to put their cash. Which sadly it's been a byproduct of the spike of inflation we've experienced. But really prior to that, it was, debating is a 0.5% better than point 0.5 point. I'm sorry, they're the same thing. Is a point 0.6 better than point 0.5 as opposed to now? Well, there's really some great opportunities that people hadn't considered, and they really appreciate understanding the breadth of, okay, what does risk really mean to me in not just the performance of my money, but in the context of what I value and how I'm going to be able to continue to make good decisions and not become either paralyzed by analysis or paralyzed by events. So, oh, and I actually the one thing I didn't touch on is the follow on with that in terms of managing risk is, for lack of a better way to say it, to not put all your eggs in one basket, in the sense that there are different types of investments. The podcast here is about real estate, but understanding how the different potential asset classes uh, fit into your long term success. Some investments historically provide income or more income than other types of investments that typically they grow over time, and then how do all those pieces fit together in the context of risk? Because once you get very close to a goal and you're basically in the home stretch, you don't have any wiggle room to make mistakes. So then what do you do? How do you migrate and mitigate understanding? It's one thing if you're saving for, and just because we're all young here, when we're saving for college for our kids, it's a little different when they're 5 or 10 years old, or when they're 17 getting ready to go to college. Who wants to have all their money invested and then the markets go sideways right before they need the money for college? Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So how do we position somebody to win along the way without feeling like they're missing out? And that can be a challenge, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I definitely can see how there'd be a lot of challenges with that. And I know coming from myself personally, I've never been fortunate enough to have a financial planner help me with anything. I've never had that yet. It's on my to-do list for hopefully before 2024 ends. But either way, for myself, I think like, okay, being someone coming from the real estate world, I feel that financial education is something I'm familiar with, but there's a lot of different things that I'm unaware of. I'm not familiar with the stock market at all. I'm not familiar with all these different types of things, and I've always been curious what type of, like, as far as for you as a financial planner, you would help with all of the things like the investment, the tax liabilities that go along with it. Like what aspect of the investing in
I think I get you.
can you help with?
So it's a great
Advise.
question. So the one of the reasons that I originally, back in the day, we were American Express Financial Advisors. They wanted to focus on credit cards, and we got spun off as Ameriprise. But the reason I never really considered leaving is the real cornerstone of our business is long-term relationships with people that are seeking comprehensive advice. So we build long-term relationships and help them achieve their goals. The reality is that every part of your financial life is going to affect some other part of your financial life at some point. So it's what I should say, I refer to like I invented it. From a financial planning perspective, there are really four cornerstones. And I'm going to go in the least exciting order because I think, especially in today's world, it's not about what's the most fun to talk about with finances. It's what we need to be conscious of. So um, the first quadrant is cash and liabilities. Are you earning as much as you should on the money you have? At the same time, are you paying as little in interest as possible? Uh, and making sure that we're really planning to make sure that you've got not only money for a rainy day, but if you can make that money grow, then you make it grow. The next area is really, I'll use a broad term called contingency planning, which covers everything from life insurance, disability insurance, health insurance, but also, frankly speaking, I don't do estate plans, but it's something everybody gets kicked, dragging, and screaming to meet with an estate planning attorney. Um, because at the end of the day, it's called comprehensive for a reason. And it's all about making sure that what happens while everything's good happens. But then if there is an unforeseen event, someone becomes incapacitated, that everything you want to have happen and all of your wishes are still carried through. Now, from there we talk about taxes. Now, I don't do people's taxes. I've never done them. That's the role CPAs, um, tax preparers. The distinction, Crystal, that I would draw is that if we're driving down the road and let's say it's you, me, and a CPA or your CPA. We're driving down the road. The CPA is going to look in the rear view mirror. What's happened? What was your income? what were your expenses, what are the other things you need to consider, and here's your tax return. They might say that, well, uh, because there are some potential changes in the tax code based on your business or what you have, here's a couple things to think about in the next year, but really that's it. What what I'm doing is looking, down the road based on your lifestyle, what your goals are, where you're going to live, how you're going to be spending your money, how you're going to be spending that money down the road. Are you going to be in a higher tax bracket, the same tax bracket? Are you going to be potentially in a lower tax bracket? Understanding that once you all get there, whether you have money in just like a regular investment account, some type of company retirement account, some type of IRA, here's what I think people miss. At the end of the day, they are all taxed differently. The IRS looks at them all differently, but they are all for a common purpose. So I would take the position that you look at them virtually as the pot of money for a given goal that you want to accomplish, and that you look at, okay, so then what does that mean the allocation looks like, and then how are we going to understand and what's going to need to happen as we start taking those funds out, and what the tax looks like in the future. The last of the cornerstones is investments, which whether it's money that I manage or money that you have in your work retirement plan, it doesn't do anybody any good to not have all of the investments. If you're not looking at all of it, you're missing a big part because you certainly don't want to be. Remember, I said all the eggs in one basket. You don't want to have all the same eggs over here in a retirement plan that you do have outside of your retirement plan. So with my financial advice, financial planning clients, even if the money sits in their 401k, 403b, 457, SEP, simple, whatever the plan is, I make sure that I'm taking an integrated, comprehensive approach. And the way I like to say it is if it has anything to do with your finances, I need to know about it because it's the only way I can make sure that you're getting the best advice. I might not always have the exact answer, but I do have resources, whether it's at my firm or other professionals that I've worked with, uh, to get an understanding and concern of how how you might want to go about it. The way that I heard someone, and I don't love the analogy because not everybody really embraces American football. I can't believe I had to call it American football, but I really am the quarterback. Everybody else has other roles, but I'm the one that knows where everything is, how everything fits together, because that's how you can get my personal opinion is you really can't give the best recommendation without all the best information. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? And,
Yes.
and the other thing is, it's not just whatever you have with your company. That includes discussions like, do you use the prepaid legal? What do they offer in terms of disability? Do you understand how the disability works? Can you buy more? What do they offer in terms of life insurance for you, a spouse, your children? There was a period of time, I don't know if it's still the case, but uh, federal employees were eligible to enroll their parents into a uh, long-term care, which is code for uh, non unskilled nursing care. But they were able to sign them up for it, and which was pretty amazing because it's expensive, it's hard to get, but the government's subsidizing it. But really, all of those nuances and how they all fit together can be really important.
Nice. I liked that quarterback analogy actually. It for me, again, not having the experience of what someone like yourself would do, it really helps. Like it makes sense that okay, this is where the ball is. We have to spread everything out appropriately to get to, the end goal for the touchdown. So that definitely helped put things into perspective for me because I know one of my first questions for a financial planner would be like, okay, where do I get started? How do I get started making investments? Because I know a friends of mine, that's exactly what they're asking. They're asking me, like, hey, do you use a financial planner? Can they help me with investments? That type of stuff. So I'm sure that's probably one of the first things that is that, would that be true to say one of the first questions you get is, okay, where do I start investing for retirement?
Well, and where I then say is, I then will take a step back because uh, if I'm not anything if not consistent, is when somebody says I have $100,000 to invest, I'll say that's awesome, and they'll ask me, so where should I invest it? And I'll look at them and I'll wait, and then they'll look at me like I'm like, well, I need to know a lot more about your situation, what you value, what's important to you, um, and because some people, and this I've seen it happen more than once, is somebody will inherit some money and be all gung ho to invest, and then realize that they don't actually have to rent their apartment. They could go buy a house. They get a deal on a duplex,
Okay.
and so what I would share with you is if someone's an entrepreneur, we start a little differently than I do with someone that's so a business owner is a little bit different than someone that's what I might refer to as, or that we would know as, W-2 employee. The first is, do you have money for a rainy day? First of all, do you understand what a rainy day fund is? And people say, oh yeah, I got a couple grand in my savings account. I'm like, oh, uh-huh. Yeah, right. And what's your monthly expenses? And they go, well, 4 or 5 thousand. So how does that, so having a, starting with, and it's literally like, I'd like to think of it a pyramid. For our purposes, it's really more of a triangle, but you got to have a great foundation. So when somebody says, Pete, I want to start investing, because the first thing that'll derail investing is they don't have enough money for a rainy day because, the tree falls on the roof. And then, so it's, okay, you got your cash flow under control. Okay. Do you have money set aside for a rainy day? And it doesn't mean that you can't multitask your money, where you save money for a rainy day and then you save money uh, and you invest it. But making sure once they've got money for a rainy day is, what are your goals, and prioritize them for me and tell me why you prioritize them that way. And then understanding what their past experience, everybody, whether they have or not, knows someone that inherited something related to investments, whether it was stock or mutual funds or something, right? And really trying to figure out what their experience is, because to your point, where should you start? Well, if you've got to give a real kind of crash course on what this is and what that is and how all this fits together, I found people can be very impatient and just uh, go invest the money on their own. So part of the conversation, Crystal, is this: do you want to do it yourself? Because that is awesome. More power to you. If you're going to do it yourself, I respect it. But I'm not really sure you're going to need me, because our relationship is not one of a debate team. It's more of, you don't want to, I'm a professional in your life, that this isn't really something you're interested in or want to take care of. And so making sure when somebody says, where should I get started, that what their experience is, what their interest is, and how all those pieces fit together. And so, ideally, what I'd like to have a conversation, and it's not a perfect system because not everybody is ready for that mirror. And I've had many clients that eventually became planning clients, but I'm still going to ask a lot of those key initial questions, because depending on what they have offered through their work, they might get money matched depending on where they save it, how they save it. Uh, they might miss out on, on an opportunity. So when somebody says they want to get started, it's asking a lot of the same questions that someone comes to me and says, Pete, I want to do. Most people don't walk in saying they want to do financial planning, because rightfully they don't really necessarily know what that all encompasses, but understanding Some people like to gamble, and that's how they look at some of this, and that's not my role or wheelhouse. I think there's probably other uh, individuals that um, can help them on that path. But I'm interested, because Crystal, what I'm ultimately interested in, not to be a broken record, but like I said, I'm consistent, is um, building long-term relationships with people that are looking for advice, where they can achieve uh, their lifelong dreams. So sometimes that's starting saving into a Roth IRA, and then we get to other things. Other people are ready for comprehensive planning, and then some people are all in between. But I can tell you this: I've had more than one client that all of their money, because of their profession, whether it's their profession or their trajectory, uh, all their money is they've got money for a rainy day because it's important, but all their money is tied up in not tied up, but invested in their work in their company retirement plans. But I've had people say, "Oh, I can do that," or "Oh, that's how this fits together." So it's part of the challenge is understanding the options and how they all fit to your situation, because ultimately all the information you could ever want to know about finances is on the internet, but what's going to really give you the biggest impact on the most consistent basis? So what I would say is, if you wanted to get started investing, you should sit down with someone that's going to ask you, why do you want to start investing, what's it for, and then go from there. Anybody that says, "Oh, okay, let me set up an account," and then they pull out a marketing slick for something, it may or may not be the best fit for you. Not that they're showing you a bad investment, but it might not really be ideal for what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, um, buying an apartment building, when your kid is 18 to pay for their next year of college, it's kind of, I mean, that's an extreme example, but that's, sometimes it can drive the point home a little bit better. But I will also share with you, Crystal, that my business owners, you- they wouldn't be in business um, if they didn't enjoy it and find a lot of value in it. And that can be a real balance for a business owner. Are they better off, especially once they get to a certain point, are they better off investing more money in their business, or do they need to begin looking at other alternatives? Because most business owners that I know, their return is consistently, hopefully we'll get in trouble for saying this, but it's what I've seen is the stock market, hope this isn't a shock, goes up and down and up and down. Okay. And businesses, there are up years and down years, but the return on businesses, because not only do you then have equity and flexibility, but the return on your money invested can be, um, can be pretty powerful. But to that point, they don't want to run the business forever, and so how do they begin to do something else to kind of give them some education and dovetail so that when they're fully ready to step into financial
Yeah,
independence,
that's true.
they know
That
what
makes a lot of sense,
they
and
know what to
I
do. But
love the whole. I
I
love the
was I
fact
was
that your
blessed that early on I
priority is to just
realized
build
that
that long term
successful business
relationship. I
owners are
think that's
successful for a
coming
reason,
from, again, someone without that
and
info on what it
balancing
would look
out
like to
where
work
they
with a
should
financial
be
planner. That
putting
makes
money at
me
any given
comfortable.
point
It
is
makes
an
me
important
realize that, okay,
conversation to have.
it really is a long term thing. The sooner you get started, to me, it sounds the better off you are, because if you obviously have to take less risks if you're starting out a little sooner, and you can achieve your goals quicker and all that. So I love the whole aspect of, it's a long game, it's a long plan. And it's about knowing truly what it is that the client would want. I love that, because coming from the side, it's really important, and it's hard to almost, prior to speaking with you, know, like, well, how are we really going to be on the same page? How can I let someone else, and me, I'm a very controlling person. I like to be in charge and have the reins. How can I let somebody else guide me on such an important thing? But it makes sense that we take so much time in really learning what it is that we would want.
Really?
Hmm.
Well, and you raise an incredibly important point, and to be very clear, I don't live with the consequences of anyone's decisions but my own, which really what that means is I'm the chief financial officer. And if I do my job right, then the chief executive officer is then making decisions. And you never, and to be very clear, you never stop being in control at any given point. And when it's funny. One of the things that I didn't mention is in the first year, face to face, we're going to spend way more. You spend way more time together than you could really ever imagine, because to get through the financial planning process, which I'm not going to bore you, not bore you with the details, but go into it. But that's a series of 4 to 5 meetings and some phone conversations, whether it's in person or some of my my clients that folks I live with that are far away from Michigan. But once we are, the reason I charge an annual advisory fee is there needs to be something in it for everyone. And we are going to meet on a quarterly basis, whether you like it or not, until we have met, till we've worked together long enough that I feel confident that I'm generally going to be top of mind if and when something comes up. But I don't really like to meet with people less than 3 times a year because stuff just comes up. You're busy. You don't have a financial professional in your life because you're just sitting around not doing anything, right? You're trying
Yeah.
to make magic happen. So, and it's something that it's not exactly the same, but it's not too far afield that most people, when they're working out and want to get in shape, you do better if you can figure out a way to have somebody hold you accountable. Whether it's an actual personal trainer, a partner, it's about accountability. And that is a integral foundational part of of our role because from meeting to meeting, I take lots of notes and I keep track and check in. Did this get done? Did that get done? Get this and it's not like I'm the parent or the teacher, and it's not really the point. But they'll forget they didn't get on top of it,
Sure.
and then sometimes we'll reach a point where I will schedule an ad hoc phone call that we will make that call together. Uh, because at the end of the day, if somebody's achieving their goals, this is all going to take care of itself. And the if you busy people could really get it all figured out, then I wouldn't have found that meeting with people regularly would have such an impact. I mean, there are some advisors that have their own, maybe twice a year. I've just, especially with the age of some client, I mean, when you have a client that transitions into retirement, there's enough anxiety that, oh my God, I'm not going to see you for 6 months. And so, uh, you know, so maybe we have a meeting right before they retire, and then we have another one a couple months later. How's it all going? Um, and don't and this and the reality is that um, when I figure out when I'm working with someone what their annual uh, fee is, that's a part of how often are we meeting, how often are we talking, and can we agree on how we want it to work? Someone that says, "Oh, Pete, I don't need anything," and then they pop by my office once a month and want to chat for 2 hours. That's um, we have to kind of figure out that it's all gonna how it's all gonna fit. But there's the continuity of people holding you accountable to what you've said you value, because sometimes that's the only way. I've had clients. I don't mean to be all dramatic when I say talk them off the ledge, but in the last few years, there's been some pretty
Mhm.
uh, desperate, and I'm not talking about the financial crisis, the end of 2018 was more than a little exciting, and then the 2020, you know, was uh, and if you're wondering, well, what does that mean when you talk about people's decisions and what they value, and someone's, Pete, the market's down, I can't take it anymore, I want to sell out, and I'll be okay, and I'll repeat back to them. Usually, I'll use their own words against them, and I do it very lovingly. But this is what you said you wanted, okay? And we know this is what this is and what this is. So how does this decision support what you've told me not only you value and what you want to accomplish? And on the whole, they typically will go, okay, okay. Um, and some cases it's just to give them a pause to think, um, because, like I said, money is so personal, and when things go, you know, things go sideways, and you look at your account statement, you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Well, that's why all those discussions. Because what I found is for somebody to really, really remember something, you got to tell them like 10 times. So by meeting really often, I can get in on that as soon as possible. But the ongoing communication, regular returning of phone calls, um, and I know at times I've personally probably been too accessible, but I have found
That's
that
awesome. I definitely think that that's really
clients
important, especially
appreciate
for my aspect, thinking, okay, well,
knowing
if I made
that
another investment, I
I'm
would
there
feel
when
I would want to have that
they're
important
in a
financial chat before
situation,
maybe
whether
the
it's
next meeting. So I
ultimately a
think that's a
crisis or
really
not,
good standard to
that I
have.
can potentially talk
You
them
have your
through some
space, but you're being
alternatives. And
accessible. I think
especially if
it's
it's a
super
10
important.
minute conversation.
Also, it's
Anyway,
awesome.
So I have a question here, and it's kind of a little different, or so the three of us we're all parents, and part of our why here, especially with talking about financial education, is to teach future generations and to pass this on to our kids a little bit. And we had a discussion just the other day, actually, that we had read an article that there are only 8 states in the U.S. that require high school students to take any sort of financial course in order to graduate. And myself just having one that just graduated from high school this year and loves to spend every dollar he makes. What's your piece of advice for, I guess, for teaching them, or getting a kid? What are your thoughts on that? Like somebody that was just starting off, what are those first steps, or what can we do to kind of push them in the right direction?
uh, having a son that just uh, graduated, I can obviously never walk a day in your shoes, but share
Yeah.
your perspective. And when it comes to finance, and the value of a dollar, I met someone 2 or 3 years ago who comes from an extraordinarily um, wealthy background, but I didn't know that um, until after I'd met her. She's much older, and uh, she was making a joke that in her house, the glass was never half full or half empty. It was just empty. We're just no money. We're broke. You can't spend any money. And I remember thinking at the time, that's one way to make sure that people have things in perspective. So what I have, uh, what I've found is there are for younger kids. Uh, there's a couple of books that we used to provide, and it's straightforward enough that it's something that you can read with them. But what I would share with you, because and what's wonderful, I think, about
Yeah.
part of this approach is there's some universal application, because the last time my son, who plays baseball, said, "I need a new bat," Now, I don't know if any of your kids have played baseball or softball, but I cannot believe how much they cost. And so what I realized a couple years ago was I would look at them and I would say, why? And I didn't realize I literally went into financial advisor mode in the sense that I was trying to understand what he valued and why this was so important and why did he value this over something else. Now, it's really hard to get someone that's young to really think about the future. And I meant to say at the beginning, I didn't even know there were 8 states that required. I mean,
It's crazy, right?
I went to high school in Alabama, and there, I'm not sure. In one case, they didn't even offer. Sorry, thanks. That they didn't even offer. Like where I went to high school, they didn't even offer financial literacy class.
Yeah.
And so what all I can say is that the getting them to at least stop and think about what they're buying and why, and if it, depending on how big the purchase is, literally just you keep asking questions to make sure they give it some thought. But I made sure the last time it happened, I went in with some ammunition. So I was like, so you value this more than that? You value this, you talked about wanting to do this. Well, how are you going to do both of those things? And then of course, it's the wrinkle in there is that, is it their money or is it, I'd like to refer to it as our money, the parents, which, that makes it more complicated. But I don't think there's a universal approach. I've seen a lot of different books, and I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, this is the book. That's the book." And what I can share with you is we can all help our children by when they say this is what they want. We don't do we don't roll my eyes and be like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?" It's, well, really? So tell me about, why do you need this? Why is this so important? Is it, and a lot of times they'll actually even give it a second thought, maybe put it off, think about maybe what they should be buying is something else. Or, we ever thought about saving it? Well, what do you mean? Well, what are you going to do if an emergency happens? And like, well, what do you mean? You're here. Well, okay. What if your dad and I, we're not available and there's an emergency? What are you going to do? And I'm not, and this is a conversation I'm practicing, by the way, because, he goes in the fall, but, the money, the graduation money, it's, at the end of the day, you want to be self-sufficient. How do you make that happen?
I think that's great. That's a great piece of advice. I'm thankful that my oldest is only 5, so I don't have to go there yet. But maybe if I start with those values really, really young when she asks for the candies and the cookies and the ice creams, and maybe by the time she hits that, it'll be an easier conversation.
Whether it's shoes,
but all in all, Pete, thank you so much. All of that was just so fantastic. Appreciate you kind of really giving us a great overview of what it would look like. I love the fact that, in the end, it really truly seems like the biggest thing for you is what are the end goals, what are the dreams, and that's what gets you to where you want to go. Thanks for all the info on what it would look like to get things started, because I know, it's sometimes it can be tough for any of our listeners that are listening to this thinking like, should I call a financial planner? Do I need a financial professional in my life? I think a lot of this info on what it's going to look like, it can be very, very valuable to them. So thank you so much for being here, Pete. We really appreciate it. So thank you again. And to all of you guys, our listeners, we want to thank you so much for joining us at the round table. If you want to learn more, you can always check us out on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. And that's, of course, where you can find this episode. And anytime on our website at therealestatewoman.com. So again, thank you so much, guys. Bye. The information contained in this podcast is for educational purposes only. We are not licensed professionals and do not give investment advice, tax advice, or other professional advice. Please consult a licensed professional before making any financial decisions.